Welcome back to the Loss Prevention News Network. I'm Joe LaRocca. We're filming today at the National Retail Federation's Protect Conference just outside of Dallas, Texas. And last week, the National Retail Security Survey results were released to the industry, and they show a slight decline in the overall dollar losses for retailers from $48 to $46 billion nationwide. But don't let that fool you for a second. Those are just merchandise losses. They don't look at the safety issues and the scary challenges of dealing with verbal and physically abusive offenders at the stores. We also have challenges in the supply chain that need to be addressed, and counterfeit goods, and a whole host of other problems. Our next guest is Karl Langhorst, the Executive Vice President of ALTO US, who's uniquely qualified to talk about these challenges and some of the solutions. Karl, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here.
Thanks. Now, Karl, you're a former retailer, and now you work as a service provider, so you really have seen both sides of how to address this challenge, and you've had a seat at the table, and now you're working with people and helping influence the discussion. Tell us a little bit about what ALTO Alliance is all about and what you're doing.
Well, ALTO Alliance initially started about 12 years ago in the south part of Chile when our founder, Jorge Nazar, was a local prosecutor, and he kept seeing the problem of recidivist retail theft offenders continuing to return back to the stores. If that sounds familiar to what some of you are experiencing in your stores, it happens all around the world. But he came up with a very unique solution for it to break that recidivist cycle, and it's based on three key elements of intelligent prosecution, deterrent marketing, and comprehensive analytics, and that makes up ALTO Alliance.
Interesting. Now, you're here in the United States, a program recently rolled out,
yes.
And you're working in a number of those areas already. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with U.S. retailers and how people might engage you.
Absolutely. We launched Alliance earlier this year, and we picked a very quiet market, Los Angeles, California, to start in. Everybody asked me, why did you go with L.A.? And I will say that L.A. picked us. We initially met with Los Angeles Police Department, one of their deputy chiefs. He was very impressed with the program and knew that there was a communication gap that continues to exist between the retailers and the law enforcement community, and he wanted to help the retailers, but he wasn't sure all the different ways to do that. And so Alliance was born and started in LA. And fast forward several months later, we now have a memorandum of understanding with LAPD and the city attorney's office in LA, which is just amazing. They're using our platform, and we have several retail clients, major national chains as well as local, that are now signing on to the Alliance.
It's fantastic. And in California, which is certainly a huge mecca of retail and retail challenges, unique that you're starting there. On background, California has really changed a number of laws over the last 5 years that have significantly impacted retailers. That started with AB 109 and releasing what they called nonviolent property crime offenders back into the population from the county jails due to overcrowding. Then Prop 47 was voted in by California voters, and 57 several years ago. And where that's really left California is this market of high crime, a number of property offenders. It's a whole host of other issues which we can't get into today. But Karl, what I think a number of retailers are saying, we've traditionally talked about two categories of offenders. We've talked about opportunists or amateurs that just pick something up, the person shopping, they want it, they take it, that's it. And on the other side of the spectrum, organized retail crime offenders that are targeting stores habitually. They're making significant amounts of money doing this. There's something almost right in the middle right now where we have people that are addicted to opioids or they're mentally unstable. And it's hard to call them organized retail crime offenders. Their bosses may be, but we have a real challenge. And I think new types of crime, and we need new solutions.
Yeah.
And also seems to be filling that gap a little bit.
Well, I think
Tell us about it.
that's a great call out, Joe. And this is something that I would challenge personally AP executives, my peers in the industry, need to look at it that way, because you mentioned earlier it's almost oxymoron, nonviolent retail offenders. That is, as we all know that have been in the business for some time, the offenders have changed, and so our perspectives on how we deal with those offenders have to change as well. The individuals, for the most part, that are hitting the stores now are becoming more and more violent, and I know many of you are aware of that, and your employees and your customers are on the front line. So how do you address that differently than you've ever done before? I would argue, in speaking with the city attorney's office in LA and the LAPD, that they understand that. And they understand that they need to respond to these cases from retailers. And then retailers are saying, well, I'm having a tough time getting them to respond. So this is part of the educational process that Alliance does, to bridge that communication gap between those entities and make sure that all of those offenses are brought not only to their attention, but we actually show up in court on behalf of the victim, the corporate client, and represent them as well in criminal court to make sure that their voice is heard. And understandably, although the laws have been in California, and quite frankly across many states, have been reduced on how you prosecute retail theft offenders, there are still laws, and they can be utilized and should be utilized to the maximum effectiveness. And that's what Alliance does. And we make sure and bring those cases, if you will, in a nice, neat package to the prosecutors, and make sure they're aware of the problems that retailers are facing with these individuals.
Yeah, that sounds so important, and
it's huge.
I was just listening to one of the sessions with Anna Marie Schubert, who's the district attorney up in Sacramento, and she made a really good point about retailers that the statistics we see today are the ones just reported. There's a whole host of other crimes with vehicles and pickpockets and others that people just don't take the time to report, or law enforcement agencies aren't necessarily classifying on those records. And it's a challenge that we're facing. I want to shift gears, though, because there's another big challenge, not just in California, but nationwide, as we talk now about the e-commerce and where we're going in the supply chain and this overwhelming demand. I know ALTO Alliance is in the supply chain world.
We are.
Some of your roots in the organization started there. Tell me, what is ALTO Alliance doing to help retailers with the supply chain?
So that is our ALTO Assurance brand, and then we do have a very strong record, again, across Latin America, dealing with some of the biggest retailers in the world, working with their supply chain, making sure that product is safe and secure all the way from the manufacturing facilities through the distribution centers and en route all the way to the stores. A very comprehensive software solution that ties to the existing technology or introduces new technology to retailers, and really takes all that noise that you have from all those different areas and brings it into a very succinct, analytical and real-time alerting system if you do have something that is going on in your supply chain that's a real threat for loss. Interesting.
And now, looking at the overall portfolio, what are some of the areas that you're tackling next? Is the goal to move into new markets? Are you looking at new...
Absolutely. You know, we've started in LA. We're expanding out throughout California. We've had talks with major retailers, and quite frankly, we've been approached by some very, very major law enforcement agencies to come to their city as well. And so the Alliance is looking at doing that. Understand, Alliance is a software solution, but it's also a people solution, a concierge level solution. And what I talked about earlier, we do have our attorneys showing up in court. We have our paralegals responding and bridging that communication gap from the prosecutor and law enforcement back to the retailer, so cases don't get dropped. So it is a very strategic, methodical solution to get it rolled out. It's not just software and you turn it on. That's a good part of it, an important part, but it's a people solution. So, you know, we're open to feedback on where you'd like to see us in your company. California today, who knows where next week.
That's fantastic. And if retailers wanted to learn more about the company, where would they go?
www.alto.us.
ALTO.us. Since I have you for a couple more minutes, if you'll indulge me,
Sure.
here at the National Retail Federation's Protect Conference, you have a session coming up later today with the district attorney from Sacramento.
Absolutely.
And with some other of guests. Can you tell us a little bit about the session, who's
Yeah.
involved, and what are some of the topics you're talking about?
I'm real excited to be moderating that session. So inside the battle, how reducing retail theft laws impacts community safety. Really interesting. And so on that panel, as you mentioned, Anne Marie Schubert, District Attorney from Sacramento, dynamic individual, along with Kathleen Smith, VP of Albertsons, very innovative in the AP industry and well known. Also, we have Commander Blake Chow from Los Angeles Police Department that we work with on a regular basis in Alto. And we also have the Senior Director of Community or Public Relations, Government Relations, for the California Grocers Association. We have some real industry experts on there. It's going to be a lively discussion.
Sounds like a fantastic session. Now, if somebody's listening to us here right now, what time is that session?
2 p.m. in Texas Room 5.
2 p.m. at Texas Room 5. And for those of you watching back in the office or watching this delayed, you can usually find National Retail Federation sessions online and go back and look at the slide presentations and get the information. And I know Karl would always be happy to send you additional
Absolutely.
information if you want it. So let's switch gears to the National Retail Security Survey.
Yep.
It was released last week. There were a couple of ahas in there. Big aha in your mind in any area?
Well, I think part of the problem or challenge is, and Anne Marie mentioned it a few minutes ago in the session, is retailers are starting to under-report crime, and they're doing that, quite frankly, out of frustration. Why bother?
Right.
The police are going to take forever to come, and things such as that. So I think that's it, an aha. And the other thing that I think still needs to be captured in industry surveys is the violence level to store associates. And I continue to challenge people that are giving those surveys. We need to start capturing how many times violence or threats of violence are included in there, because that's the real important thing here. We've got to protect our people.
Right. If you have a daughter, a friend, family member, one of your relatives, a younger person working in a store late at night, and they're closing alone, it's one coverage. Imagine some incident occurring and how scary that is for them and for you as a family member. And these are the challenges that retailers are facing every single day. Karl, we need to leave the discussion right there.
Yep.
Thank you so much for spending some time
Thank
with
you.
us. This is Karl Langhorst, who's the Executive Vice President with ALTO Alliance. I'm Joe LaRocca. Stay tuned to the Loss Prevention News Network, your #1 source for LP news and information.